The question came during Thanksgiving dinner right between the mashed potatoes and pumpkin pie. My Aunt Rebecca looked directly at me across the table and said, "Christopher, are you a femboy?" Like she was asking if I wanted more cranberry sauce. My name is Christopher Morgan, and in that moment 20 relatives stopped eating and turned to stare at me, waiting for an answer to a question I had spent 3 years making sure nobody in my family would ever think to ask. The silence stretched on forever. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My dad's face went completely blank. My younger sister Isabella looked confused, like she was trying to figure out what a femboy even was. "Why would you ask that?" I finally managed to say. Aunt Rebecca pulled out her phone and turned it toward me. On the screen was my secret Instagram account. The one where I posted pictures of myself in dresses and makeup. The one I had convinced myself was completely anonymous. The one that had 15,000 followers and zero connection to my real life. Except somehow my aunt had found it. "I recognized your room," she said calmly. "Same blue walls. Same posters. Same window with the broken blind. I have been following you for 3 months, trying to decide if it was really you or just someone with an identical bedroom." My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This was not how this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to tell my family on my own terms when I was ready, not get ambushed at Thanksgiving dinner in front of everyone. "Can we talk about this later?" I said quietly. "No," my dad said. His voice was cold in a way I had never heard before. "We're talking about this now. Is that you in those pictures?" I looked around the table at all my relatives staring at me. My conservative grandparents who still thought being gay was a phase. My uncle who made jokes about men who acted feminine. My cousins who I had never been close to because they thought I was weird. Then I looked at Aunt Rebecca. She was not smiling, but she was not frowning either. Just waiting calmly for my answer, like whatever I said would be okay with her. "Yes," I said. "That is me." The explosion that followed was exactly what I had always feared. My dad stood up from the table so fast his chair fell over. My mom started crying. My grandmother clutched her chest like she was having a heart attack. My uncle said something about how this generation was ruined and kids these days had no respect for normal values. Only Aunt Rebecca stayed calm. She stood up and took my hand. "Christopher and I are going for a walk," she announced. "Everyone else can use this time to remember that he is a person you love, not a problem you need to solve." She pulled me out of the dining room and out the front door before anyone could stop us. We walked in silence for 2 blocks before she finally spoke. "I am sorry," she said. "That was not how I wanted this to go. I thought if I brought it up casually in a group setting, your parents would have to keep their reactions measured. I did not expect them to react so badly." "Why did you bring it up at all?" I asked. "You could have just kept following my account and never said anything." "Because I have been watching you shrink yourself at family gatherings for years. Watching you pretend to be someone you are not. Watching you hide this huge part of who you are because you are terrified of rejection." She stopped walking and looked at me seriously. "I wanted to force the conversation because hiding was killing you slowly, and your family deserved a chance to actually know you." "They hate me now," I said. "They are shocked." "That is different from hate. Give them time to process." We kept walking through the neighborhood, looking at houses decorated for the holidays. Everything looked so normal and perfect from the outside. Nothing like the disaster my life had just become. "How did you know it was okay to ask? How did you know I was actually a femboy and not just doing it for attention or as some kind of phase?" "Because I spent months reading your captions. Watching how you talked about gender and identity and self-discovery. You were not performing for anyone. You were being yourself." She smiled sadly. "I recognize that because I did the same thing when I was your age." "You were a femboy?" "I am still figuring out what I am. But I spent my 20s hiding who I was because I was scared of how my family would react. I dated men I did not love. Wore clothes that felt wrong. Pretended to want things I never actually wanted." She looked at me seriously. "I am 43 years old, Christopher, and I am just now starting to live authentically. I did not want you to waste 20 years like I did." We sat down on a bench in a small park. We sat there for over an hour talking about identity and family and fear. She told me about relationships she had sabotaged because she was not being honest about who she was. About opportunities she had passed up because they did not fit the image she was supposed to maintain. About years of therapy trying to untangle who she actually was from who everyone else needed her to be. What happened? I asked. What made you finally start living authentically? My wife left me 6 months ago, she said quietly. I stared at her in shock. You were married? To a woman? For 15 years. We met in college and I convinced myself I was happy. That having a secret queer relationship was enough. That I did not need my family to know the truth about me. She wiped tears from her eyes. But living a double life destroyed us both. She wanted a partner who could be proud of her publicly. I wanted to be that person, but I was too scared to lose my family. Where is she now? Living her authentic life in Seattle. Happy in ways I could never make her happy because I was too busy hiding. Aunt Rebecca looked at me with something fierce in her eyes. That is why I asked you that question at dinner. Because I know what happens when you choose family approval over being yourself. I know how much it costs. And I refuse to let you make the same mistakes I did. We walked back to my parents' house together. Most of the relatives had left. Only my immediate family remained sitting in the living room looking exhausted. We need to talk, my mom said when we walked in. For the next 2 hours we talked. Really talked for the first time about who I was and what I needed. It was not easy. My dad said things that hurt. My mom cried multiple times. But they also listened. Really listened to me explain what being a femboy meant to me. By the end, my dad still looked uncomfortable, but he said, I do not understand this, but I love you. We will figure it out together. My mom hugged me tight and whispered, I am sorry I did not create a space where you felt safe telling us sooner. Even my sister surprised me by saying, I think you look really pretty in your pictures. Way prettier than I ever look when I try that hard. After everyone went to bed, Aunt Rebecca and I sat on the porch looking at stars. Thank you, I said, for forcing this conversation even though it was terrifying. Thank you for being brave enough to have it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. I need to tell you something. Something your mom does not even know. She took a deep breath. I am not actually your aunt. I looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? Your grandmother had an affair 45 years ago. I am the result of that affair. Your grandfather raised me as his own, but I am not biologically his daughter. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Your actual biological aunt is someone named Rebecca, who your grandmother's lover named me after. She was a drag performer in San Francisco in the 70s. Your grandmother met her at a show and fell in love with her feminine energy. My mind was spinning trying to process this information. So the person I am named after was someone who performed femininity? Yes. Your grandmother never told anyone about her affair, but she kept all these letters and photos hidden in her attic. I found them when I was 20 and confronted her about it. She begged me not to tell anyone, but she also told me about the real Rebecca. About how magnetic and beautiful and free she was. Does this mean being feminine runs in our family? I think it means your grandmother recognized something in you when you were born. Something that reminded her of the person she loved most in her life. That is why she suggested naming you Christopher. It is close to Christine, which was the real Rebecca's birth name. I sat there trying to understand that my entire identity was somehow connected to a drag performer my grandmother had loved decades ago. That the parts of me I thought were mistakes or accidents were actually echoes of someone who had lived boldly and authentically. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you deserve to know that femininity is part of your inheritance, not something wrong with you. Because I spent years thinking I was broken when really I was just continuing a legacy. She smiled through her tears. And because your grandmother is dying. She has maybe 3 months left. She made me promise to tell you the truth before she goes. My grandmother died 6 weeks later. At her funeral, I wore a subtle touch of makeup and a shirt that was just feminine enough to honor who she really was underneath her conservative exterior. My Aunt Rebecca spoke at the service. Told carefully edited stories about Grandma's appreciation for art and beauty and unconventional expression. Only I understood what she was really saying. Only I knew she was talking about a love affair with a drag performer that had shaped our entire family tree. After the funeral, Aunt Rebecca gave me a box. Inside were letters and photos of the real Rebecca, a stunning person who had lived authentically in an era when that was dangerous, who had loved my grandmother and been loved back, who had died of cancer in 1985, never knowing that decades later someone would carry on her legacy of feminine expression. My aunt asked me if I was a femboy at Thanksgiving dinner. The question destroyed the illusion of family harmony, but it built something more honest in its place. It freed me from hiding. It freed Aunt Rebecca from decades of shame. It revealed that our family history was queerer and more complex than anyone had admitted. Sometimes the questions that seem designed to hurt us turn out to be invitations to finally live truthfully. Sometimes family is not about maintaining comfortable lies. It is about having the courage to speak difficult truths and hoping love is strong enough to survive them. I am a femboy. My aunt is figuring out her own gender journey. And somewhere in our family, history is a drag performer who loved and was loved and left behind a legacy neither of us knew we were inheriting. That is the truth that came out at Thanksgiving dinner. Messy and complicated and more beautiful than any carefully constructed lie could ever be. If you enjoyed this story, you can find more like it in my Femboy and Cross-Dressing Stories bundle. 5 complete stories available now on Amazon for just $4.99. Until next time, keep exploring, feeling, and becoming who you are.